Joy with Real Progress in Action. Tonight I have a candidate who was recommended to me by several people in DSA. She is running for Congress in Texas District 25. So thank you so much for joining us. This is Heidi Sloan. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Really, really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So you had an interesting night. Sorry we had to push the show back a half an hour, guys, but it's worth the story. So across the country, a lot of you guys know, some of you guys probably went knowing you guys, there were protests for solidarity across airports. We had a bunch in PA and probably in your states. So Heidi, do you want to kind of explain what went down today?
Yeah, so I joined in at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport with some friends and some colleagues, let's say, that I have gotten to know over the last year from Unite Here. And these are folks who have been working in the food preparation for airlines across the country. And at DFW, it's at American Airlines, but it's different airlines depending on the airport. And these folks are negotiating through the union for a pay raise so they can have living wages, and negotiating for healthcare at a reasonable cost so that their families can continue to go to the doctor and be treated when they are feeling ill. And just knowing Unite Here and having spent some time with them previously, they are highly intersectional. They really are organizing from among their membership and centering the stories that their demands are collective demands in the truest sense, and that they're coming from this internal bubbling up of power, of understanding that the working class making demands is what leads to real change across the country. So Unite Here did this incredible coordinated action, as you were saying, across the country, where at different airports, really major airports, both workers and organizers and community supporters gathered to remind our airlines and our airports who actually makes things run there. That it takes every single worker, including those who are doing food preparation, to make that business, and that businesses like American Airlines not recognizing the role that their workers play and just extracting this enormous amount of profit have got to sit down and negotiate with workers. And so that was our demand today. It was really beautiful. The chants were on point. I love a good picket chant. And we had in Dallas, as well as in places across the country, some civil disobedience going on. So I got to be part of that, which I am really deeply grateful to our organizers here and at Unite Here Local 23.
So you did actually get arrested today.
Yeah. And it's getting arrested alongside workers who are putting their jobs and their security on the line, as well as their liberty on the line, is really amazing. And I feel grateful and honored, and also deeply fortunate that was a sort of a smooth and not such a scary interaction. And I feel like when we can leverage the space where a person like me, particularly like a white person whose job is not at stake, can go in and be part of that and stand with people who maybe have more at stake or are more at risk. That is part of solidarity, is putting ourselves out there and making sure that we are holding that space together.
Absolutely. Was it the first time you've gotten arrested?
It is, weirdly enough. I've helped with more than a couple of direct actions in other organizing work that I've done, but I'm usually the person who is let me make sure that the bail fund is set. Let me make sure we have everybody's phone numbers, or that the media is playing that role or that they need to play. But today, all of those roles were played by incredible organizers. And so I got to be in that space with some really wonderful people.
I'll share something with you guys I've never shared. Don't take away my savage name, but you guys know I've been, organizing shit for 4 years and I've never been arrested.
We're gonna work on it. We're gonna find that moment for you where you are like, I can't not be.
It'll happen. I'm usually the one that's like, shh, you guys just come on. You just kind of like, I play like mom more than, but it'll happen. It'll happen. So what convinced you, like what inspired you to start running?
A couple of things. For me, my sort of day jobs have been, I was a worker at a public school. I was a teacher's assistant for a number of years and really loved that. I was in a classroom of completely integrated of kids with all kinds of needs. And it was a beautiful space. And honestly, it was like a fully funded public school because it was in a particular part of town with a really, a resourced PTA, let's say, and that vision really helped me to regard our public institutions with a lot of my own personal stake, knowing that those are democratic and that they serve all of us. And especially when they're well resourced or adequately resourced, they can do a great job of serving all of us. And then for the last 7 years, I have been working at a permanent supportive housing community, a community for folks who are exiting homelessness, chronic homelessness here in Austin. And I love my work. I get to grow food with people and share food with people. And I love food and I love people. So it's really wonderful. But 7 years amongst individuals who were on the streets and living under overpasses and in tents for 10 or 20 or 30 years has meant that I've lost a lot of my friends. I've grieved a lot of people, and I've lost a lot of people to the prison system and to unmet mental health care needs. And so I started doing community organizing, just like you, and got totally hooked. The first campaign that I got to work on here in Texas was for earned paid sick time for all workers, and going and knocking doors and hearing people stand up for their neighbors and say, I want this for me and my family, but I also want it for the person down the street. I think that they deserve this right as much as I do, was incredibly powerful. There's nothing like it, and have just been working on campaigns ever since. One of which was pressuring our progressive congressional representative, Lloyd Doggett, to sign on to Medicare for All, which took 18 months. And it shouldn't have. It shouldn't have. And for me, I think about Medicare for All pretty much every morning when I wake up, because my partner doesn't have health insurance and my mom doesn't have health insurance. And most of the people that I work with don't have adequate health care coverage. So to know that some of our top rated electeds who are relatively engaged don't understand that we are desperate, that we are every day waking up and worrying about this, and that it shouldn't take them 18 months to hear from their constituency and move on something, and then to know the power of the working class united and pushing for change. Congress is it, because that's where we can create these universal policies that most impact the people that I care about and the working people here in this district.
Absolutely. Do you notice with some of the other presidential candidates saying they're for Medicare for All and they're just not? Do you notice that it's kind of difficult in ways to explain what kind of Medicare for All you support?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's become like name brand and off brand kind of, and as an organizer, it was very important that when we were pressuring Lloyd Doggett, we were getting him to sign on to HR 1384, Jayapal's bill, which I love centers community-based long-term care for chronic health needs I think it's a really well articulated bill, and it complements the Sanders bill really, really nicely. This is the vision that I'm working for. So when we are organizing, when we are actually pressuring those in power to meet the demands of their communities, which is what I think organizing actually is, we're not just asking them to move in a direction, we're asking them to do something specific. And for me, Medicare for All is specific. I've read the bills. I've made the literature on the bills. I have talked to workers about the bills. I have envisioned what the bills would do in my own life. And for folks to come in and say something like a single payer system someday, Medicare for All, Medicare for America, Medicare something type system, it really waters down what we know we want and what we know we are fighting for. It really does anger me. It makes me feel as though so many of our candidates and representatives are not honoring the voices of the working class organizers who have poured themselves into this policy for such a long time.
Absolutely. I don't know if you're familiar with why is my mind blank? Oh my God. That's all. Dr. Dooley. Dr. Victoria Dooley, she is a surrogate for Bernie Sanders, and she opens speeches for him all the time. And she is a doctor, like hardcore Medicare for All, and I had her on the show, and we decided we're going to call it Bernie Care because he's the only one that takes out, for-profit insurance company, and he's the only one with, true single payer. So that's what her and I have been calling it, just Bernie Care.
Yeah, I always tell people in Texas we have a really reactionary right-wing governor. His name is Governor Abbott. He's a person that I love to hate, and he has great healthcare, and my mom doesn't have healthcare. And I always tell people I want a single payer system because I want Governor Abbott and my mom to be in the same boat, because then he will stop trying to destroy it. And because then I know it will be the best care, because he would absolutely never settle for anything other than the best. And so when we say a single payer system, it is a way of saying that all of us deserve the same level of care, no matter how rich, poor, urban, rural, whatever the deal is. And that is solidarity, right? And so when people water that down, it makes me question if they understand the deeply problematic nature of dividing up the working class.
Absolutely. What is it? I know for me, it's just absolutely infuriating when I see candidates who have such plans, and then they they post articles about a 21-year-old dying without insulin. Do you really care? Because why are you posting this? If you cared, you would not have that kind of plan. So how do you ever, when you're canvassing or talking to people on the phone, do you ever come across someone who says, yeah, I really need help, but I'm going to vote for, your opponent, even though that's totally against their best interest?
Let's talk about electability. You know what I mean? Like, this idea that we have to settle for the more mainstream, the more traditional option because we are fed in our media and in our politics the idea that polls come from somewhere other than us, that electability is determined by some other outcome than people voting. And obviously, I think that we should expand the electorate, that all justice-involved people should have access to the vote, that we should lower the voting age, that voting day should be a holiday. All of these things are true. But even now, in our not perfect by a long shot system, we are still the ones who determine the outcomes of elections in this country. And when someone says to me, I'm going to vote for this other person, even though your policy lines are what I actually think that I need, it is coming from an ideological standpoint instead of a materialist standpoint. It's really important for us to call that out. And I think that when we talk about power, building power, leveraging power, like we were doing today, we can offer a viable alternative to the top-down power structures that say, vote for close enough, because centrist close enough will at least not make it worse. Instead of vote for what you actually think is right, vote for and organize around and build power together with your neighbors, with your interest, with the ideological sort of neighbor, the ideological solidarity that actually drives us towards a specific goal rather than this kind of wishy-washy could be worse situation.
Absolutely. And you did touch on a little bit of housing a few minutes ago. And, that's obviously a great concern for pretty much everyone. And we noticed that there's only one presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders, who actually calls for a cap on rent, which is insane. So what do you support as far as helping people in the housing crisis in Texas, in District 25?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love to talk about housing because housing is a human right and we don't treat it that way. Housing has become a vehicle for investment and profiteering. And that's what even people who are struggling to stay in their housing often understand it to be, because all of the powers that regulate it are in that boat. And so when we stop and we say housing is not a commodity, housing is a community, housing is a life-giving atmosphere for every single one of us, then I think we can have a real conversation about housing. And so our policy standpoint for housing is every conversation starts with, I think we should have more democratic control over the spaces in our lives. And people always say, what do you mean? How do we have democratic control over our housing? And it looks different for different people, but at the end, it's one spectrum. So whether you are a person who is renting your home, that tenants should have the right to representation in eviction courts, that eviction should not be held against tenants, that people who have struggled to stay in housing in the past, that cycle doesn't help anyone to just keep people out of housing. Whether you are struggling to move into housing right now, in which case the market doesn't solve for this. I can tell you right now, I have worked with so many people who have tried to get into affordable housing that is like public-private partnership. Even though public-private partnership can be good, it's not enough. We need public housing. We need to be able as communities to say we value every single person who lives here enough to make sure they have a roof over their heads. That's what democracy looks like. And then, housing can be really divisive because oftentimes people want to say this class of renters and this class of people who are struggling with their housing, sometimes experiencing homelessness or or housing insecurity, are different than people who own their homes. When I don't think that that's actually true. People who own their homes, we know in our lifetimes, we have seen people who own their homes lose everything because their housing has been used as a way for big banks to make a profit. And so when we say this policy is for all of us, I think rent control is the only way to go, because when we say yes, per year cost of housing is going to have to increase. We don't want people who own their homes to have like a depreciating value or not be able to make those tax payments or whatever the situation is. But we don't want housing in places like Austin and the cities across the country to explode so fast that even people who own their homes cannot stay in them anymore. And that happens every day in my neighborhood. People have to move because they can't afford their taxes. And if housing values are limited in the amount that they can go up, by limiting the amount rent can increase every single year, and those are tied together, we know that they are, then more people can stay in the homes that they already own. This is a way of building a universal housing policy and a way of saying that we in the working class, whether we are experiencing homelessness or we own our home, demand that housing be treated as a human right. That's what I mean by democratic power over our housing, is saying that the market doesn't dictate, that we dictate what our housing policy looks like.
Absolutely. And as far as who you're running against, is it just a Republican, or are there other Dems, or how is it set up?
Thank you. So I am in the middle of a competitive Democratic primary. The filing deadline is December 9th. So we're like, maybe there's just the two of us. We're going to find out really soon here. And then the cycle is, the primary is on Super Tuesday, March 3rd. And then the general will be, of course, with the presidential election in November. Yes, the Democratic primary is competitive. There is another person who ran last time in this district who is running again this time in this district. She is a totally fine human being. She will generally follow me where I go policy-wise, which gets really fun because it makes me really appreciate how much community organizers like our family across the country are making a difference in what you can say and can't say in places like Texas. But she and I have vastly different theories of change. I want a blue wave in Texas because the Republican Party is harming people here in real and tangible ways. But I don't think that we get a blue wave unless we get a wave of organizers, unless we build institutional power in our communities. I don't think that just electing Democrats gets the goods. I think it takes all of us standing up, and that from office, our electeds should be continuing to platform and to grow that power, which is the thing that we are really, really, really interested in. We're modeling sort of this campaign on people that we admire a lot, to say that we want to lead with 1 foot in Congress and 1 foot here on the ground, showing up for Unite Here, showing up for tenants who are being evicted every day, showing up for our neighbors experiencing healthcare crises on the ground, organizing, building that power, and making sure that we are dismantling the system and handing it over from within, which is complex, of course. But so that's the difference between me and the other Democrat running. And then, of course, in the general, the Republican incumbent is Roger Williams, who is one of the richest members in Congress. He's an inheritor of used car sales dealerships up in Fort Worth, mostly. So it is a very long district. Sorry, Lance is asking questions about the district. It's a 4.5-hour drive, which is why I was late for the show, from one end of the district to the other. In Texas, I don't know if this is like how people measure distance to other places. We measure it in hours on I-35, which is our freeway. So it's a 4.5-hour drive from one end of the district to the other. And Roger Williams doesn't really show his face in any of it, except for like closed door fundraisers. He lives up in the Fort Worth area, or has lived in the Fort Worth area. And I'm mostly down here in Austin, but I love that I have an excuse to go do rural organizing. I don't love gerrymandering, but I do love that. I think the only way we win this district is by working class solidarity. Really not saying left, right, but saying top, bottom.
Absolutely. Yes, you're always welcome to ask questions in the comments. I don't always see them, but since you gave me a heads up, absolutely ask away. Yeah, my shows are always interactive, so go for it. If it's not crude or whatever, we'll address it. But yeah, as far as blue wave, I always say we need a progressive tsunami. That's what we need. Bring that shit on. Do you think that the woman who would be running against you, do you think that she'd be willing to debate you?
Oh, we're definitely rounding into that season. I'm really looking forward to it. It's one thing to say that you're for criminal justice reform, and for me, it's being able to say that actually I don't think that prisons help people at all, and not that we're gonna like close every prison tomorrow, but that's our orientation. Is that putting people behind cages and in handcuffs and in solitary confinement and on death row, all of these are symptoms of a punitive justice system that I'm ready to take apart responsibly, bit by bit, but take it apart nonetheless. And so I can't wait for debates because taking power and putting it in the hands of the people is work that you can't tie a bow on and say, I know how to get from A to Z, and then we're going to be done with it. Unless you're out there actually practicing that and acknowledging the complexities of that, then I think you rhetorically back yourself into a corner if you're not saying, and then the working class is going to stand up and take what is ours and move us on to the next stage of this development. So yeah, I think she will be. I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Usually people say, nope, not a chance. So that's awesome. That's good. Do you support a federal jobs guarantee?
Oh yeah. Okay, let's talk about a Green New Deal. So a federal jobs guarantee for me is best situated within that overarching framework of a Green New Deal, which we are starting to figure out what that looks in terms of like substantive policy initiatives right now, starting with housing, which is great. But a federal jobs guarantee is the mechanism, I think, for saying that the market as it is will almost certainly refuse climate justice. It's not going to do it. The folks who have been profiting off of climate crisis and engaging in practices that make the climate crisis worse are not going to turn around and say, great, now we're going to invest in this renewable and care-driven economy. And so we know that work has to be done. And we want it to be done. The vast majority of people see the need for taking care of one another, our communities, our land, our environment, so we can create those jobs. It's not as though the job creators are actually the ones who are doing the work in the first place. They just had the funding. And so if we demand that those jobs be publicly created, by the federal government, the other side benefit to getting the work done is that federally created jobs, a jobs guarantee program, also means that those jobs are organizable. Those are union jobs. So we're not just talking about valuing care work and creating space for renewable energy and stewardship practices and honoring long traditions of caretaking in this country. We are talking about all of that work happening in the framework of a union. And that, to me, it builds power, it builds security, and it is one of the most sustainable things that we could do. Democratic voices in our environment, you know, we see this struggle every day. It is one of the most talked about pieces of our policy platforms. But if we just want democracy over our environment and aren't talking about democracy over the work that takes care of it, I think we end up in the same cycle again. And so a federal jobs guarantee is a mechanism for stopping that cycle and building power in a different way.
Girl, you're just nailing everything. I'm like, I got goosebumps. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to quote that. That's good. Hey, I've interviewed over 150 candidates, all Bernie supporters, all the same platform since last year. So for me to be like, whoa, like that, trust me, you're wowing me. Let's Luke is the gentleman who wanted to ask a question. Let's see, he had a question about guns, and now, there we go. Okay. I was only today introduced to the Second Amendment sanctuary county thing by some of the conservative members of my local community, but I was rather stunned that this is something Texas is focused on. I was just wondering what Heidi's thoughts on this are. Side note, I just discovered the show and I love it. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Awesome. So are you familiar with what he's referring to?
Okay, so I'm trying to think through which one this is. Second Amendment sanctuary county. Is this, and Luke, feel free to answer me here, is this the reaction to, so Texas is just a reactionary legislature. They like to write bills that respond to progressive policy that enacted in Texas. That's how it works. Like there's very little original language there. It's just like, Austin did something, let's do anti that. The Second Amendment, the Sanctuary Cities bill, is that the one that is, sorry, I'm looking up because I want to get this right. That's the one. I'm not familiar. Okay, so there are 3 kinds of bills in Texas that are dealing with sanctuary spaces right now. One of them is like sanctuary for the unborn spaces, which is like an anti-abortion, anti-reproductive justice bill that's coming up right now. One of them is an anti-sanctuary cities bill that sort of like takes that language and flips it on its head. And it sounds like this is the gun rights equivalency of that, keeping anyone from having any limitation on their gun rights. That's amazing. I haven't heard much about that. For me, when we talk about gun rights in Texas, because I have, and I'll just like take this and go in a direction, and maybe Luke can ask more questions. This is not surprising to me that this is a thing that people are coming up with right now. I have so many friends in Texas that hunt and that have guns in their homes that are secure, and that is who a lot of Texans feel that they are. For us to talk about gun safety and gun rights, I think is tremendously important, acknowledging that can coexist with background checks and red flags that say sometimes those same individuals should not have access to firearms. But that's going to take, for us to really absorb that and incorporate that into our culture, we have to be able to say in Texas that mental health is real, that we all have it, and that we all deserve care for it. We have to make that part of our everyday conversation if red flag laws are going to work. That we have to say that those who are harmed by domestic abuse and domestic violence should be believed, that they should have an alternative to incarceration for their loved ones or their members of their family who are perpetrating that violence, so that they will call and ask for help. If we want red flag laws that catch and prevent domestic abusers from having weapons, we have to treat domestic abuse more seriously and more holistically. If we want to get at the root of gun culture in Texas, we also have to talk about state gun culture. We have to talk about how our police are incredibly heavily armed. The Pentagon 1033 program that Trump really, really loves, and I think like intentionally shovels old military weaponry that way, or like buys new military weaponry so he can pass it down to the police. This is a program that gives all the leftover military weaponry and defense to any police department that asks for it free of cost. It is terrifying to know that our police are armed against us to that level. And so there's a part of the Second Amendment that I understand. That's very scary and it's very serious for a lot of people. So that's another part that we have to dismantle. And then finally, of course, in Texas, especially gun violence, mass gun violence, and racism and xenophobia and transphobia all go hand in hand. And so as we talk about programs and policies that build solidarity, that are good for both the person who would choose to carry a gun and those who would not choose to, that we have to be really explicit in saying that a red flag is a white supremacist, that a red flag is a person who practices hate speech, that these are all red flags, and we have to be building institutional, cultural transformation to move people out of that space and move people into care of their neighbor. So it's really complex here. I don't really like the discussion that says we're going to come take your guns. I think that's really divisive, and I think it's not really understanding why people operate in that space and why we get so many of the outcomes that we get. I'm certainly pro ending distribution of assault weapons, but by ending distribution, I mean to the cops too. So I think that there are lots of good policies, but we have to keep listening to one another in the inaction of those policies so that we don't continue to be divided and that hatred fueled to make us turn against each other.
Absolutely. Luke stated that he became familiar with you at a Free Rodney Reed event.
Yeah. Can we talk about Rodney Reed?
Oh, yes. I mean, I was like, I just got goosebumps. Like, we had a small victory. I mean, it's a big victory, but we had a small victory. So now we're like, we still got work to do. So how I know all over the country, we've just been a mess about this. So being in Texas, how are you guys coping with this? How is it creating activism around you?
It's incredible. Rodney Reed's family, I can't even tell you, they work tirelessly. I've met his brother and sister-in-law and their son and his mom so many times, and they're real organizers. And I got drawn into this work. Like I have been to Rodney Reed events for years. There are some really great abolitionists here in Austin who have been organizing for a long time to free Rodney Reed. But what has happened recently, having a date, standing with the family, building community around this was a heavy thing. And I think it's right, and it's good to have heavy things as people like me do things like run for office. It was a person with a name and a date and the real chance that we weren't going to win. And it gave us the opportunity, and by us, I mean, yeah, me, but like a ton of organizers in that space, to say, free Rodney Reed and abolish the death penalty, because we don't want to do this again tomorrow. It's hard. It's terrible. As much as I love the people that I share that space with, I don't want to go back to there. I don't want to ever have to protest and build power against someone facing the death penalty ever again in my life. So abolish the death penalty. And also, if we're going to say that, we also have to say abolish solitary confinement, abolish shackling. And, you know, you start listing the things that would keep us from being in a situation where we are carrying a Rodney Reed. And you get really far. You get to those cages and those prisons, and you say, actually, I don't want to have to advocate for anyone to not have to be locked away from like human contact and healing. And people were willing, because they loved Rodney and his family, to follow us down that line and have those real conversations. Again, not as like a thing we're going to snap our fingers and suddenly the criminal justice system is perfect and there are no prisons, but as wounded human beings able to recognize the things that wound us and envision a world where that isn't true. We cried so hard, like everyone on my campaign, when we heard the news. Just like, we still have work to do. Of course we do. We always do. Freedom is a constant struggle. Angela Davis, book recommendation. There we go. But to know that millions of people were thinking about how terrible the death penalty and death row and the carceral state were because this man and his family is amazing.
Absolutely. I think the Rodney Reed case is the epitome of the power of the people is stronger than the people in power. Like, that is what it's all about. Over 3 million people, signed the petition, and people rally and protest, and we were able to pressure him to, stay the execution. It's incredible. It really is. And it's a sign of what we can do when many of us get together. Rob would like to know, are you familiar with modern monetary theory, MMT?
Honestly, not as much as I should be. And if you have like good articles or books or podcasts, please send them my way. I am so much of like a social services person, and my economic understanding comes from those spaces that when we get into more theoretical like analyses, I don't have the sort of like the language base. But I would really like to be able to understand the importance of that movement and to be able to respond to people's concerns or hopes around it. That's just me being a regular, can I say regular ass person?
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, the gentleman who does a podcast on here as well, he does economics and he does MMT, and Bernie's economic advisor, Stephanie Kelton, she does MMT. So we always like to ask candidates. But yeah, we'll definitely hook you up.
Thank you.
One of us. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so additionally, as you know, federal jobs guarantee, housing as a human right, Medicare for all. What else about the Green New Deal is imperative to you in Texas? I know next to Pennsylvania, you guys have like, the the highest fracking and pipelines and all that fun stuff. So where, what would you like to see as far as that goes?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Texas policy around energy has for a significant portion of like the of history revolving around fossil fuels has really set a precedent for global policy around energy. And in my state, we don't even call it like the Energy Commission or the Oil and Gas Commission. We call it the Railroad Commission. So people don't even know. And that's intentional. They don't want to change it because if you don't call it what it is, then you don't get called out for it. I have so many friends that have worked in fracking and oil and gas. I have pictures on my phone from some friends that worked in the refineries near the Gulf Coast, and there are pictures of stickers all over the walls of these oil refineries where it says if the refinery catches on fire, and it's like a picture of a cartoon character on fire, that it's like not the company's fault. And I want a world that we can live in, and that's going to take divesting from the oil and gas industry. But I also want my friends to be able to make a choice to have a living and not go to work in a place where they say, if you catch on fire, it's not the company's fault. And I think that is possible. I also know that those same friends are perfectly capable and very willing to turn their craft towards renewable energy. I think Texas has an amazing opportunity with building trades unions to say that we're not just divesting, we're investing. We're going to take those jobs and those resources and we're going to turn them in the opposite direction. The oil and gas industry has absolutely devastated our landscape and continues to do so. And it's not unique to Texas, but we feel it certainly. And the opportunity to heal requires both these policies, but also recognizing that the people who are going to do the healing are the people on the ground. So building trades people, ex-refinery workers, a just transition for these folks. And I'm a farmer. I got to shout out my love to the growers and the ag people of the world. We love the land. We love the water. We love clean air. We love the fact that we are nourished by our surroundings, by our landscape. And to put conservation and stewardship in the hands of people who have been doing that work for their whole lives is, I think, a just transition in itself to support our growers, especially our small growers who are feeding their community. This is a really important distinction that we have to make. People who farm, people who ranch, people who work in oil refineries, they are not the problem. It's the people who are creating those industries for profit and driving them towards less and less renewable practices and putting pressure on the markets. Those folks who are working in those industries can help us solve the problem, and we have to organize them.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of digress a bit to voting, because right now, obviously, all across the country, people are, there's a lot of people feeling defeatist. And what's the point? Is my vote going to count? We all saw ridiculous amounts of cheating from the DNC last time, and people are very concerned, rightfully so. What is your message to people who say, what's the point? Why should I vote?
I get it. And there are institutions that have been deliberately created to make your vote not matter for a long time, for the entire history of this country. But we're not just asking for your vote. That's one way to practice democracy. And there are so many more. Joining a union is a way of practicing democracy. Going to your school board meeting or your city council meeting and organizing in that space. Standing up and organizing with co-tenants. That's a way of practicing democracy. Building campaigns around environmental justice is a way of practicing democracy. So yeah, I do think you should vote. And I also think that you shouldn't expect too much of it, because that's not actually how change happens in this country. That is deliberate. And we got to keep working on that. But in the meantime, make sure you are voting and make sure that you are voting because it is your right and it is important. And that the person you're voting for is encouraging your power in all of these other spaces. If they're really for you, they're going to call you out as a whole human being and say, I want more for you than your one vote.
Absolutely. What is the message you want to leave with the viewers to take away so they can hit up people in Texas and say, look, I saw an interview with this, this candidate, and also just, a note you'd like to leave it on to summarize your campaign and the movement you're in?
Yeah, thank you. I think we are building a campaign in a red district, in a red state. And what we know is that we've knocked over 20,000 doors, and every time one of those doors open, the conversation is not a red human. It's just a regular human worried about their kids or worried about taking care of their parents, worried about their water. And we have to do this in Texas. Nobody else is going to do it for us. But I think that it is worth all of us across the country recognizing that the Democratic Party has not reached out adequately to rural and poor voters. These are people we have to practice solidarity with. And so we are working on that imperfectly and growing every day. We're working on it. We need your help with that. We need you to believe that it's worthwhile to reach out to these people, that they're worthwhile. That's the difference between us and other campaigns. And that we are grassroots in every single way. Our volunteers who show up week after week, multiple times to go out and knock doors, and our donors who look a lot like Bernie donors, who are mostly small dollar donors. There's a reason that nobody rich wants to give me money.
Good. I'd be concerned if they did.
Yeah, and so as we build this, that those donations are going to volunteers who are going out to our neighbors. It's not building anything other than a pipeline for this message. And so we need your help with that. We need you to come to Texas and hang out with us and block walk with us. We need you to share on social media. We need you to donate $5, and I love it. It encourages me to know and to understand that people are given what they can. So it's so much gratitude for all of our working class and organizing neighbors across the country, and also a continued we're using those resources to the best of our abilities, and we'll keep doing so.
Awesome. What's your contact info, your website, your Twitter, all that fun stuff?
Everything except for Twitter is just Heidi Sloan. So HeidiSloan.com, Heidi Sloan on Facebook. And then I think Twitter is Heidi Sloan for TX. Our email address is Heidi@HeidiSloan.com. And you can honestly reach out. Tell me what I don't know. Help me grow. Connect me with people. I promise if you say this person's worth calling, I'll give them a call myself. That's what I do. But I'm grateful to know you and to know the people who are here supporting you, and to get good questions and find more ways of growing.
God, you're just so awesome, man. Okay, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, you're coming back on before the vote. I'm just kind of like, do you guys see how polite I am? You guys love it. So, just thank you so much. You guys know what I'm going to say to you. If you share this and you tell all the people who watch, everybody give $1 every month, set up a recurring donation. You have how many friends? That's a lot of dollars. So just keep doing that. It's not enough to just fight for Bernie. We got to get people who will help him, bring these proposals to fruition, and also, inspire people around the country. It's not about one person. We need, we need people like Heidi in as well. So thank you guys so much, as always, for watching. Some of you guys know this who follow me on Twitter, but I I interviewed for the Bernie 2020 campaign, and I'm a nervous wreck waiting to see if I get a call back. So I'm so freaking nervous. So just like pray for me, send good vibes, whatever you do, because I'm like a nervous wreck because I'm in Pennsylvania and the job's in New Hampshire. So I will have to like go away, but it's for Bernie. So just send me positive vibes or something. But thank you so much, Heidi. I wish you the best of luck. And like I said, I'm definitely going to be inviting you back on before the election for sure.
I really, really appreciate it. And good luck to you as well. I think that would be an incredible choice for them to make. And we're all in your corner and in Bernie's corner.
Thank you so much. Much love, everyone. How fabulous is she? Oh my. She's just great. You guys give me some damn good suggestions, I'm telling you.